Welcome to Angloromani with Pricey. I'm Pricey, and this is the series where I look at the etymology of words from the dialect slash paralanguage that I grew up with and use them as a lens for the sort of cultural history of Romany people generally, but also specifically those in the UK. In today's video, I'm looking at people, names for different people. So specifically today, it's going to be like man, woman, child, children, that kind of thing. And in future episodes where I look at people, I'm hoping to get a little bit more specific. All of the words in today's video are very ubiquitous, and so these are words that are very commonly said in a variety of contexts, as opposed to a lot of the words that I've looked at so far where it's very specific to, I suppose, when you're sort of around Romany people for a long time, you might pick up on these words, or when the conversation is flowing in a certain way in certain context. But these words, like the words Romany and Gorgia, are used quite freely in a variety of situations. Let's get into this. So the first word I'm looking at is the word mush. Mush is basically man. There are other words for men generally, or for man generally, but mush is a very, very common one. It has kind of crept into like common parlance in certain areas of like UK society, like particularly working class people might say mush quite a lot. And in that regard, it's like a lot of other words, like for example, gather or Chavvi, which I'll get to in a bit. Now, in terms of the origin of the word mush, linguists have supposedly linked this one back to the Sanskrit manusya, but there is a bit of a dispute around this apparently, and because of that, I am willing to believe, or kind of inclined to believe, that the origin of this word might be a lot more local to where I live today, i.e. European, specifically Slavic. As I mentioned in another video, I went to Slovenia some years ago, and the Slovenian word for man is, I think, mosh, or it might be moshki, one of those two. Moshki in particular is kind of interesting because it kind of relates to a word that will come up in a future video, but nonetheless, this is similar enough to the word mush, mosh, moshki, that it made me believe that the origin of this word was Slavic. And indeed, when I looked into it a bit further, some speculation came up that it may come from Old Czech through contemporary Czech and Slovak, and their word is literally mush, so it's literally the same word in Europe, and so it might be one of those things potentially where it got picked up by Romany people travelling through Europe before arriving in the UK, like so many other words. However, there is yet another piece to this puzzle, because the origin of that word may actually go back to manusya anyway. So it may have a common ancestor. It may have come from the exact same place. I don't know. I feel like we've been here before with some other Romany words that have been picked up in Europe, or potentially picked up in Europe. So as I've mentioned before, particularly I think in the introduction video to this series, words can vary wildly from family to family. And that goes the same for this next word, Rakli. In my family, the word Rakli means woman, just general woman. But it can have different meanings in other families, which I will get into in a bit. Now, there is another stipulation here. Unlike mush, which very much refers to like adult men, Rakli tends to be used for a variety of ages from quite young. No, you could specify and say Rakli Chavvi, but I'll get onto the word Chavvi in a bit, up to a certain age. It could refer to older women, but there is another word that I noticed that my dad in particular used more often when referring to women who, let's say, had kids who were kind of grown up, or women who'd been married for a long time, that kind of thing. But I'll get onto that in a bit also. So as I mentioned earlier, the word Rakli means different things in different families, even in the context of Romanys in England. In my family, as I say, it means woman. Any woman sort of above 18, note in different contexts, can refer to younger than 18. However, in other families, it refers specifically to under 18 only, so girls, and more specifically in other families it is Gorgia or non-Romany girl. This is kind of interesting because the word Rakli has a masculine equivalent, which is Raklo, and both of these words in turn come from the Hindi, or it might be Punjabi word Laka, which in contemporary Hindi, and as far as I know, potentially in Sanskrit and Saraceni Prakrit, is Ladika. And this just means like boy, effectively. So I don't know when it sort of crept in that this would refer to non-Romany boy / girl. But yeah, the E suffix is apparently feminine, which is going to lead me nicely into my next word. But before I go into the next word, I want to mention a couple of bonus words for woman. The first of these is Mort. Now earlier on I said that Rakli in my family, particularly how my dad uses it, refers to adult women who are a little bit on the younger side of adult. So sort of like maybe 20s, 30s, or maybe unmarried women without children. The word Mort is very much the inverse of that. Mothers, grandmothers, older women, basically. Or, women who have been married for a considerable amount of time. And this is a case of English cant making its way into the Romany language. So not traditionally a Romany word at all, but a word that has been used in English, not exactly slang, but sort of made up words from like roguish types, in England, and over the years it's crept into the Romany lexicon. Similarly, an Old English slang term, Buer, has entered the Romany lexicon at some point in England, and my dad doesn't use this one too much. I take it to mean something pejorative in its use, but I don't know if he uses it specifically in that case. Traditionally, this word was like slag or whore, like a pejorative term for a promiscuous woman. The spelling of this word is kind of interesting too. I don't half wonder if this might be linked with the demon of the same name. Let me know what you think. Okay, before I get into this word properly, let's discuss something. It's a little bit of a rant of mine. The term chav is not what some upper working class social justice warrior who has spent way too much time online has dreamt up as an acronym for council housed and violent. Bullshit. I'm calling bullshit on that right now. The word chav blatantly came from a town not unlike my own, probably a bit larger than my own. And what I mean by this is, in my town, being Romany, not so much being me, but other Romany families in Howsham where I grew up, was seen as a bit of an aspirational or a revered thing among lower working class people, particularly because in my town, Romany families had a lot of like economic and social swing. So there are a lot of towns across England where this is still very much the case, and as I've mentioned in this video and in previous videos, occasionally Romany words worked their way into like working class dialect. And so the term Chavvi, which means child in contemporary Anglo-Romani, has kind of made its way into like common parlance. People will say as a sort of affectionate way, Alright, Chavvi. And this is very much like the Southern English way of saying, yeah, boy, to your mates. I can almost guarantee that chavs probably gave themselves the name chavs as a shortened version of Chavvi. And it very much was like the Romany connection and nothing to do with like, you know, oh, the middle class are picking on the working class again. I don't think it was that at all. And I say this as an ardent working class person. Now we can get into the actual word itself. As I mentioned, Chavvi means child. It is gender neutral in how it's used today. However, I have noticed in other parts of the world, chavo or chava is used for boy and Chavvi is used for girl. Again, it's that suffix of I being used for feminine and a or o being used for masculine. But in the UK today, Chavvi is just used for all children. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, Anglo-Romani borrows heavily from English in its formation of words and tenses. So when you pluralize Chavvi, you get Chavvies. So you just literally put an S on the end when you're referring to children. In terms of the origin of this word, the usual suspects come up of Saraceni Prakrit and Sanskrit, but it doesn't seem to refer to child or children or boy, but rather specifically the young of an animal. So that has kind of changed over the years, and we've ended up with a situation where we now use it to refer specifically to human children. The final words I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to do at the same time. And these are the words Rai and Rawni. These mean man and woman respectively, but specifically high class. With Rai referring to, I guess the English equivalent would be gentleman, but it could also be just someone who is wealthy, perhaps a royal person. It could refer to someone who's just basically done very well for themselves professionally, like a doctor or a lawyer. You might say they're a Rai, or the female equivalent, Rawni. What's interesting about these words is that unlike a lot of words where they've changed quite a bit as they've migrated away from India, these words have very contemporaneous connections, with Rai still somewhat being used in India today. No, I guess the most notable equivalent would be Raj, and the feminine equivalent Rawni has its origin in the word Rani, which I believe is Saraceni Prakrit, possibly Sanskrit, and again is still used in contemporary Indian languages today, like Hindi and I believe like Bengali and Punjabi. The only distinction between the Romani words Rai and Rawni and their Indian, even contemporary Indian equivalents Raj / Rai and Rani, is that the Indian languages seem to refer specifically to members of the royal family, so king, queen, or prince, princess. Something I did find quite interesting about these words, however, is that these words, or potentially a common ancestor of these words, seem to have some link with the Latin terms Rex and Regina. So yeah, that's an interesting little twist. And with that, those are some of the more common general terms for people that you find in Anglo-Romani today. As always, feel free to ask me any questions in the comments and I will get back to you. And if you had any thoughts on any of the words that I said today, then let me know in the comments and also I'll get back to you. Feel free to check out the rest of my channel for more Anglo-Romani sort of videos like this one, as well as music discussion and retro gaming. Feel free to subscribe if it takes your fancy. Feel free to like the video if you enjoyed it. And until next time, have a good one.